Inspiration Forge.
Welcome to Inspiration Forge. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf. Let's take a look at what we're building today. So today's build is a basic wooden wagon. We'll take a look at the entire process on how to build one of these, including horse harnesses and wheels and the box for the wagon. A basic box wagon, that's what I was looking for. But being a bit of a history buff, I was looking for, well, what kind of actual historical record was there? And in particular, I was looking for a wheel that didn't have spokes. I didn't want to mess with spokes. It just seemed to be too much of an issue playing with foam and cutting wood and etc. So I didn't want to do spokes. The examples I found here were pretty consistent. Everything had spokes. So I'm going with the blank wheel anyway. So that's what you're going to see in my build. So start off with building the box frame. Not too difficult. I took a rectangle of foam core, the size that I wanted the wagon to be. Then I took two bamboo skewers and pushed them right through between the paper, so just through the foam itself, not the paper, and allowed that to hold the axles. And that seemed to be pretty much the easiest way to attach axles. Everything else seemed to be too bulky and protrusive, so that's what I went with. I then decided to put a seat on at the front. I haven't glued anything at this point. I was still using my favorite technique right now, which is pinning everything together. So as you can see, there's pins through everything to hold it together. The glue's hanging out in the background watching Critical Role Season 1 apparently. Once I made a decision that I liked what I had, the dimensions seemed right and everything else, I pulled everything apart and textured it. So there's a close-up of the texturing that I had done. Simply used a pen to do the division between the boards, and then scored the boards themselves with an Exacto knife, and you'll see lots of knots and things. I just kind of like the way that breaks up the grain, so I put knots in pretty much everything. Starting to glue things together. I did make a mistake, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to catch that till I point it out, see if we can figure it out. I wasn't happy with this once I noticed it. Here's again pinning. I'm not too afraid to have the pins sticking out all sorts of angles while I'm holding it together for gluing. Those holes are barely noticeable, and I usually end up hiding them. As you can see, that one's going to be hidden by the knot that I put in. Another couple angles of that. The wheels. One thickness of these wood circles was just too thin. Doubling them up got sort of the right thickness that I was looking for. These are really easy to get a hold of in a dollar store. They come in packages of these little wood circles, and that's what I was using. As you can see, I'd already started texturing these. There's some lines in there and the ubiquitous knot holes. As you can see, sort of plain surface and then the surface with the texturing. I only textured the one side. The other side is virtually completely hidden. There's no point in going to the trouble of texturing both sides. And there's a banding around the edge there. Zip ties worked amazing for this. I really liked the look of what they did. The only trick was crazy gluing them on without crazy gluing your fingers too much. Basically, you just crazy glue a little bit at a time, wrap it around the wheel, and then snip off the connecting portion of the zip tie. Speaking of zip ties, the next part that I thought about was I needed to put some sort of harnesses on these plastic horses. Again, dollar store find, just pick them up in a package of a variety of sizes of horses. And I started to experiment with how that's going to work. I also put together a wood structure that typically is attached to a wagon as well, just out of popsicle sticks. Going back to the wheels, I decided I want to put hubs on the wheels, like a hubcap essentially. And I found these great black beads, again at the dollar store. But when I put them on, I wasn't too happy with them. They looked a little too thick. So here I am clamping them so I can cut them in half with a saw. This worked out pretty good for the most part. Some of them came out perfect, others maybe not so much. So, but I did enough of them that I got 4 that I was happy with. Harnessing the horses. I was pretty sure this is what I wanted to do, but not entirely confident yet on how I'm going to connect that harness to the wagon. So I started playing around with running the harness along the side and attaching it to the 2 bumps that came out of the cabling together of the zip tie. Trying to get this to stay on and glue. I had to hold this. It was a little bit of a pain. But eventually I got it to stay, and that started to say to me, I think this is what I'm looking for. There's a shot of those really thick hubcaps. Wasn't so happy with, and that's why I ended up cutting them. Horse color. Wasn't too happy with the horse color, so I went back to my really basic combination of paint techniques, burnt umber, and then dry brushed, in this case pretty heavily, the tan. And there's the wagon as well. So the wagon's been painted up with the same technique, a burnt umber with a heavy dry brush of the light tan, and looks pretty good. And you can see how I put together the harness there. Crazy glued the bits of the harness zip tie from the horse together, and then that larger piece I ended up having to hot glue because I couldn't get it to stick any other way onto the wood frame. This is the finished product, and if you notice, very different horse harness, and much happier with how this turned out. And as a result, I changed the complete design of the horse harness because this looks far more realistic. You'll have to check out my next video though on the merchant's wagon to see how I did the harness. But that's basically it. There's your wagon, and you're away to the races or away to the market, as the expression would go. There's a close-up of the grain again. I'm particularly pleased with how the grain worked out. The one error in this whole thing was the sides of the wagon. You'd never splice a cut in there. You'd run a board along the entire length of the wagon, so next time I'll know better. I did have a little bit of trouble with the paint peeling, but in this case I went around and scratched enough of it off, and I may go back and touch it up, that it looks a little bit like a piebald horse, one that has spots already. There's some close-ups of the change in the harnessing. And finally, Lex Supra's got a ride here. And if you haven't seen that build already with the Roman watchtower in, check out the channel, because there are another couple of build videos that you might be pleased with. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and remember that bell. If you'd like to find more of my content, you can check me out on Facebook. If you like some merchandise, I have a store on TeePublic, both of those under the Angry Dwarf. And if you're at all interested in fantasy maps, or would like to commission a map, you can check out my site, williamsonsmaps.com. This is John, aka the Angry Dwarf, signing off.